Today on episode 62 of Rail Talk, we talk about the predictable disaster of the Parx Turf Course. Welcome Dave Grening to discuss everything happening in New York racing and look forward to a big Breeders' Cup Challenge weekend. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds, and we are officially into the best season of the year, fall, and I'm celebrating by wearing the fall colors. Like every single fall color is on this shirt, I think.
You're a kaleidoscope of autumn, is what we would call it, Joe, in the old country. Jonathan Green, general manager, DJ Stable. And Joe, this is when things are starting to ramp up. Football season is upon us. The Giants won their first game. I know that's hard to believe. And there's some pretty good racing coming up in the next couple of weeks that are basically, previews for the Breeders' Cup. I'm so stoked.
You got to pay me for that. You got to send me a royalty check. Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. Monster weekend on the track for Fasig grads. Seize the gray. $300,000 Fasig-Tipton Saratoga buy. Love the Fasig-Tipton Saratoga sale. Obviously, one of the marquee dates on the calendar, racing or sales. You got to be there if you haven't been there before. Even if you have been there before, you know the jam. You're going to want to be there next summer. Also, as we mentioned before, Thorpedo Anna, just a $40,000 Fasig-Tipton October grad. So looking forward on the sales calendar. That October sale is right around the corner. And I got a funky suspicion that I know who the cover girl is going to be on that catalog, because she's the poster child for that sale where you can find really, really nice horses for some lesser price points. The Kentucky October Yearlings runs October 21st through the 24th in Lexington. Before that, we got the digital sale October 3rd through the 8th. You can still enter for that up until this Wednesday, September 25th. So get involved with that. John's going to have a breakaway show next week with a couple of people from Fasig to talk specifically about the digital sales and the advent and the development of that. So definitely tune into that as well, because that's the wave of the future. California Fall Yearlings are tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're recording this on Monday. So if you were watching this, might have been earlier today, but that's another great place to find some middle market to lower market horses who can make you some money on the track. And that's all leading up to the November sale, November 4th, the Night of the Stars in Newtown Paddocks in Lexington, Kentucky. Can't wait to see all those star mares on offer. It's a night unlike any other in racing. So there are a lot of times that I like being right. Most of the time, frankly, I like predicting things and proving prescient and salient about my predictions. This past weekend was one of the times I hated that I was right. I hated that we were right. I hated that most of the industry that saw what was coming on Saturday at Parx was correct, because we discussed last week how dangerous it seemed to be running races on the Parx Turf Course mere weeks after we saw the condition that it was in, thanks to the video that Harold Weiner shot on the turf course. Like, there's just no conceivable way within a couple of weeks they were going to fix that level of problem on the grass course. And then lo and behold, in the first turf race they ran at Parx on Saturday, which was the Alphabet Soup Stakes, a state bred race for Pennsylvania breds, horse named Freedom Eagle went out to the front, led for the first couple of fractions, and then quickly pulled up, and of course later on was euthanized. And it makes me so fucking mad. Like I'm not gonna yell and scream and go crazy. All I'm gonna say is, like, there's so many people in this industry who still have to do better. And, there are going to be accidents. There are going to be times where there are catastrophes, and you just can't stop it. Like, it just happens. They're big animals running on small legs. It's a dangerous, fast moving sport. Things are going to happen. What we cannot accept is things that are this eminently preventable from happening. And I think it reminds me a little bit of the New York Thunder situation last summer at Saratoga, where you saw a horse's vet record that was screaming unsound, and he was continued to let run over and over until he broke down in front of a grandstand of 50,000 people at Saratoga. Now, this horse did not get euthanized on the track, but obviously that's beside the point. Think about also how much worse it could have been. He was in front. Mm-hmm. He was leading the field. And this was a pretty full field. Imagine if, God forbid, he went down. All the other horses who would have gone down over him. And this was something that any of us could have told you was a distinct possibility, if not a probability. After what we saw on the Parx Turf Course several weeks earlier, there is so much blame to go around, John. Nobody gets off scot-free here. Not HISA, not the trainers, sure as shit, not Parx. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, Joe, I think, I'm going to follow in the same suit. And that is, we all saw what was coming. We've all seen this movie before, and we knew how it was going to end. I guess I hate to say it this way, but thankfully, albeit regrettably, only one horse, broke down, on the day's cards. And I think that the influence of HISA and of people being more conscientious and the industry recognizing, that they have a reputation now that people outside of the industry, gravitate to, which is that we're not doing the right thing for the horses. I think all those things came to fruition in that one race. Now, again, the racing office did, albeit too late, cancel the turf racing for the rest of the afternoon. And Joe, I don't know the exact timestamp of it, but there were a couple of trainers, Mark Casse, Christophe Clement, that had scratched horses out of the later turf stake race once they saw what happened in the alphabet soup. So there were a couple of trainers, that did say, I'm not going to risk my horse and my jockey to this turf course, even though I've shipped them in and got them ready for this race. And this is, pointing for this race. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. The risk is too great to lose these horses. So that's one thing. HISA came in and evaluated the course on September 2nd and 3rd. And they came up with, I think it was like 9 or 10 different suggestions, from suspending turf racing until September 16th, which would have been a 2-week window, irrigate the course, monitor moisture levels, aerate the starting gate lane opposite the infield gap, fertilize the course, remove the geese. There were a bunch of things that they tamping down the divots, a lot of things that they came in, I think, were common sense, and then came back and returned on September 13th and noted improvement. And I guess at this point gave a green light to management to say that they could run at that point, but it was only 2 weeks. And Joe, we live up here in the Northeast. I don't remember, there wasn't like a scorching, heat wave. There wasn't a snow and rain and monsoon deluge where the turf course would get washed out. There was nothing that Mother Nature threw at this region of the country in that window of 2 weeks that would have undone any of the positive things that were supposed to be improved upon for that turf course. So again, I don't know exactly where the blame is. It's probably in a bunch of different hands right now. But I guess we got off easy that only a horse broke down, but that's not the right answer, Joe. That's not the right answer, because we knew this was going to happen. We saw this. We pontificated on it here on the show. We talked about it, in chat groups. We mentioned it with friends in racing, and yet it's, Parx in their infinite wisdom still decided to card these races and ultimately race at least. I mean, they were planning on racing them all, on the turf, on the biggest day of their year. So to me, it just, were they getting pressure politically to have this Pennsylvania bred turf race? I can't imagine that would be the reason. And it wasn't like the turf, correct me if I'm wrong, with the turf sprint race, it wasn't a win and you're in, right? So it wasn't like the Breeders' Cup would say you have to run this race because it's the last one that's being, that I don't think any of that happened. I think they just took it upon themselves to go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to close our eyes and cross our fingers and hope that nothing bad happens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I got the HISA Next Gen meeting tomorrow. Like, one of my first questions is going to be, how the hell did the racetrack safety
Good for you.
Services team allow this turf racing to continue? Because I can't have it both ways. I got up here and said last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever we spoke about it, how glad I am that there's a cop on the beat and there's someone in charge. They fell down. Like, Tim Woolley went after the race and did another scan of the turf course. Again, like the guy said a couple weeks ago, maybe they filled in the holes, but that's about it. I will say, John, the thing we have not had is a lot of rain. We have not had a lot of rain the last couple weeks here in the Northeast. So I think that probably didn't help that the turf course has really dried out, but it sure as hell wasn't messed up from overuse.
No.
Because they haven't used it in several weeks, and I do think the blame has to be on the trainers too. Like, Tim Woolley goes and shoots that video, and it's like, but you knew the course was like this, and you still ran your horse out there.
Right.
Like, this was not a mystery. Once Harold Weiner shot that video, pretty much everyone in the industry knew what condition the Parx turf course was in. There were all sorts of stories written about it in the TDN, the Blood Horse, and the DRF. Everybody, every owner and trainer who entered a horse in those two stakes on Saturday knew the condition, more or less, that the Parx turf was in. And they didn't vote with their feet. And they went for the checks anyway. And I think they have to bear a lot of the blame, too.
Yep, no question about it. And look, I know that if we interviewed trainers and owners of those horses in the alphabet soup, beforehand and said, why are you running in this race? The answer would have been, this is my pretty much my best chance to make money off of a Pennsylvania bred turf horse, because those races are few and far between. Is it the right answer? Absolutely not. But it's easy for me to say because, again, I wasn't running in the race. I don't point for that race. I don't, try to buy horses specifically to run in a race that's specific for those conditions and those state breds. So, Joe, you've actually brought up to me, before about it's easy for me to make these decisions when my livelihood's not on it. But if you're losing your athlete, over the risk of running on a subpar racetrack, then I don't want to say you deserve it, but shame on you for doing so.
Yeah. And sure, there's no other Pennsylvania bred turf stakes, but there's 5,000 other racetracks within a 150-mile radius. Laurel has a turf course that you can run on. Meadowlands, which was running these couple of weeks, has turf courses that you can run on.
Delaware has one.
Delaware's got a turf course that you can run on. Like, I don't want to hear that excuse. And honestly, this is the area of the country that I think we focus a lot on in terms of consolidation. There need to be that many racetracks in that close of a vicinity to each other. I think if you polled the industry on this after the events of this weekend, the past couple of weeks, which one in that area should be the one to close, I think Parx would be the runaway winner or loser, because it's an embarrassment to the sport. And honestly, like I see, you see these guys on Twitter, racing Twitter, like who pollute the replies, like the kill racing, not horses guys and all that shit. And usually I'm like, you fucking opportunistic ghouls. Like I can't stand that they're in the replies and in the quote tweets every time a horse breaks down. But in cases like this, it's very, very hard to argue with what they're saying, John.
Right. Oh, no question about it. And Joe, there have been times where, we've lost a horse. We felt the pain of losing an athlete, but I can tell you flat out that it's not because we've put a horse in harm's way. It's not because we've run a horse on an unsafe race, knowingly on an unsafe racetrack, like this, the turf course was there. Unfortunately, and this is the worst part of the industry for me, is when you have a situation where your horse is hurt and from a humane standpoint, you have to make the decision to put it down. But that's a completely different situation than knowingly putting a horse in front of harm's way. That's just, I don't care how much money it is. You have to know that if the risk is you're going to lose your athlete, and your investment, if you want to look at it strictly from a monetary standpoint, that's one thing. But that's also, and again, this is a completely different situation. But that's why it blew my mind when the New York Times came out with the show, and the breeder of Medina Spirit was like, I love my horses. I can't believe, that anything bad would happen. And I'm so happy that my horse got into this program. And then the horse died, and she was still like, oh, well, I really hope that they get another one. It's like you're putting your horses that you love in an unfair situation that unfortunately, statistically shows you that more times than the average of the industry, you're going to end up with a bad result.
Real Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the number one accounting firm in the horse business. There's one reason they're number one. Nobody knows the horse industry like they do. You've seen the success on the racetrack. Len and DJ Stable have over 200 horses, won over 2,500 races. Got to update this copy because I think you guys must be blowing past 2,600 by now. They almost have almost 1,000 clients in the horse business because they make the money, save them taxes. As you know, there's a special offer just for listeners of Rail Talk. Call Len up. He's offering a complimentary, confidential half-hour consultation, guaranteeing he'll find you value. What's that number again, Michael?
7-3 732-634-5100. Green Group 7326.
Sing it, brother. Sing it. Nothing like that in this business. You find another podcast that has jingles for their esteemed sponsors, and I guess I'll listen to it because this is a pretty good podcast. You can call them up in that number or hit them up at greenco.com. But you don't have to learn about the benefits of doing your taxes with the Green Group, from me. You can listen to this other satisfied customer, Aaron Yagoda.
So I walked into the Green Group, and at the end of 1998, I introduced myself to Mr. Green. We switched my firm over in the 2000s, and it's been very lucky for my firm, my horses, and everything I have. I owe a lot to Mr. Green. He's a big part of my life, and the Green Group is a big part of my financial life, and they really help you. And they're number one in the tax and accounting and a consulting firm of the horse business, and you'd be missed if you didn't use the Green Group.
Thank you to Aaron Yagoda, Len's other favorite son. I think Aaron.
Five of us. Yeah.
Aaron's going to bump Jon down to third, I think, pretty much soon. But call up Len and do it soon so he can find you value before the extension deadline. And then even for 2025's taxes, 732-634-5100, greenco.com. So we're so thrilled to bring on this next guest. We wanted to have him on for a while. He does an unbelievable job as the New York correspondent for Daily Racing Forum. David Grening, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Oh, it's so glad to have you. I've been an admirer of your work from afar for a long time, so I was really looking forward to this, as I said. We're going to get into a lot of NYRA stuff and more about your career and your history, but you were just at Parx on Saturday, so I kind of wanted to ask you about that experience because obviously Parx has been in the news a lot for not so great reasons, and you had a tweet that you came out to Parx just in time to see a horse pulled up. What was your sense of that day? Like, what was the vibe? And yeah, I'm so curious because it's such a big day nominally, but there was just such a black cloud hanging over it. What was your experience like?
Well, listen, the turf course at Park just shouldn't be used. It's just not in proper shape to be used. And they knew that a month ago. They shut it down for a month. They ran a race on it on Monday, a week ago today. And when I watched that race, I was appalled by the fact that they actually ran a race on that course. I had known that they were going to draw the turf monster that day. And I thought there's absolutely no way that they could run that race on this turf course. And, they had the Alphabet Soup, which was a Pennsylvania bred stakes run before that, the turf monster. And that was a race in which a horse got pulled up and ultimately was put down. And shortly thereafter, they announced that the other turf race, the turf monster, would come off the turf. I think anyone who had seen the race that I saw on Monday would have known right then and there is no way you can use this turf course. So management, HISA, whoever was supposed to approve that course for use, let people down. And I also put a little fault on the trainers for running their horses on, and owners for actually running their horses on that course. It wasn't that big a pot. You could find another racetrack. Stand up for yourself. Jockeys, stand up for yourself. And, your safety is more important than whatever check you think you're going to get riding on a course that's just not safe. And in my opinion, they should rip that out, put in a synthetic. I'm not a big synthetic guy. They should put in a synthetic surface there. Then you can use it in the wintertime in addition to the dirt, and you can use it as your quote unquote turf course.
Yeah, and it was really a questionable situation, not only because the course looked so unhealthy and so unsafe, but they had like 3+ weeks when they're not even racing in August to try to fix the course and everything like that. What was the feeling in the grandstand? I mean, were people shocked and appalled? Were they like, meh, that's racing here at Parx? What was the feeling?
I went outside to see where the horses were, and there were some people, see what was going on. And there were people that were wondering also what was going on. And there were people that were, just enjoying their day, maybe oblivious to what actually was happening and just going about, either getting something to eat or drink or going on to the next race. So, unfortunately, not everyone was, or fortunately, I guess everyone was tuned into it, knew exactly what was going on. But, it did seem, the people that were there and knew what was happening knew that something was not right and were waiting for what happened to that horse, because they didn't do it they did do it on the turf course, I believe.
Got you. Switch gears to New York racing for a second. You're as good of a person, I think, as there is to ask about this. The Belmont reconstruction project, it's all torn down now. They still have the training track in the barns, but the grandstand and everything and the racetracks are all torn up. They say they're going to reopen in 2026, but, I take that with a grain of salt because I've seen a lot of New York construction projects go way past the date that they're supposed to open back up. But you're clued in. Like, what do you think? Do you think that this is going to open on time? And what's the latest developments in the Belmont reconstruction?
Well, all I can tell you right now is they seem to be on schedule. I've been told, and I'm at Belmont most mornings, but they said they've laid the foundation for the new building. I haven't actually seen that just yet, because from where I'm at on the training track side, and when you look over at what used to be the grandstand, you just see a lot of piles of dirt and debris and whatnot. But their courses are being laid out. I think the plan is to I believe the rails are starting to be put up on what would be the outline of the turf courses. And I think they're hopeful of actually laying the sod for those courses down by the end of this fall, which would give them over a year for the roots to take hold. And it's really doing it proper. You can't make a turf course on the run. You can't say we're going to stop in August and have it ready by September. Look at Churchill Downs. They can't stop in April and have it ready, or in July and have it ready by the next April. So NYRA's doing something here that most tracks should do, but don't want to do or can't do from a financial situation. And that's plan it early, let it grow, let the roots grow, let this thing actually take hold. And when you open it a year and a half later, it'll probably be in good shape.
Right. And Dave, just to stick with the New York theme, Joe and I have argued back and forth about whether or not extending the Saratoga meet is a good thing for racing overall. What's your take on that?
I don't think it's overall good. I think if they do it in the short-term fashion, like they say they're doing it, so basically we're talking next year, another week, plus plus another day, I guess, of the Belmont Racing Festival at Saratoga. If that's all they're going to do for 1 year, maybe 2 if the project gets delayed, that's okay. If you're going to make Saratoga a 44-day meet or longer, I think you're squeezing the lemon dry, and I think it ultimately will backfire on you. These boutique meets, they're special for a reason because there's not supposed to be that many days of them. We've already extended to 40 over the time since I started covering this. It was not 40. I wasn't there for 24, but it was 30. And then at the 34, 36, 40, I think you're at the absolute limit at 40, in my opinion. Can 44 work 1 year? Sure. And, to show how they're not really interested in extending the meet is they're not going to call the extra week Saratoga. That's going to be, let's see, how many acronyms do we have? The Belmont at Aqueduct at Saratoga week of racing.
Right.
So I don't think their plan, I could be wrong, but I don't think they're planning to have a July 4th to Labor Day meet once they get Belmont Park open. You're not spending $500 million to open a racetrack not to be there.
No, so David is on Team Joe and said it better than I could or did. So I appreciate that backup on that. But no, I wanted to know a little bit more about your history because, like I said, you do a great job covering New York racing. You've been doing it for pretty much all the time that I've been following New York racing to a certain extent. How did you first get into the sport, and how'd you find your way to this post at the DRF?
So I started covering horse racing in 1991. I was working and living in Maryland, not covering horse racing, didn't even know a horse is what from a horse is whatever. And I went to interview for a job because I wanted some outside critique on my work. I was in my early 20s and I was like, is this really the profession I should stay in and, covering sports and go on. So I interviewed for a job at the Trentonian, Trenton, New Jersey. And I told the guys flat out, I said, look, I don't know anything about racing. I thought it could be racing. I didn't even know that racing was a year round thing in the mid-Atlantic or, even in the New York area, to be honest with you. So they said, that's fine. We like your work. You'll learn and and we'll sort of guide you and correct up your sloppy mistakes. And, it was almost like writing a term paper every day. Because I get red markings back. This is good. This isn't good. Almost get it graded from my publisher. It wasn't even the Sports Center. It was the publisher of the paper who was really into racing.
Right.
So anyway, so it was the summer of 91. First assignment was the Haskell of 91. I remember going down to Monmouth Park. I was living in Somerset, New Jersey, drove to Monmouth Park, sought out Frank Brothers, and I said, Mr. Brothers, I'm David Grening. I work for the Tritonian. I know that your horse Hansel won the Belmont. I know he won the Preakness, and that's about all I know. And about an hour later, I knew a little bit more. And then I sort of started my career there. Trenton is close to Hightstown, New Jersey. Hightstown, New Jersey is where the Daily Racing Form is published or used to be published and printed. There was a gentleman by the name of Greg Gallo who was an editor there who kind of liked my work and he had gone to the New York Post. And in 1994, he called me up and asked me if I was interested in going to the New York Post. And I said, sounds like an interesting deal. Of course, I had just moved to Princeton, New Jersey, so now I was further away from Belmont Park than I was even, about 3 weeks before that. So I started at the New York Post in '94. Holy Bulls Met Mile was Memorial Day when they used to run on Memorial Day. That was my first assignment for the Post, and I stayed there until 1998 when Steve Christ's group purchased the Racing Form. And they asked me if I was interested in coming over to the Racing Form, and they were bringing over some folks from the New York Times editors. And I was like, this has the potential to be really good. And some of the other members of the staff that they were talking about who were there and who they were bringing in. So right after Saratoga in 1998, I switched over to the Racing Form. It was the same gig. It was covering New York racing and kept me still doing the Triple Crown and the Breeders' Cup. So in September, it actually was up, I believe the actual starting date for me it was September 11th, 1998 at Daily Racing Form. And it's now September 23rd, 2024, and I'm still there.
Wow.
Amazing.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. I'm still there.
They might find out, right? David, out of all those years and decades you've been following racing, is there one horse or one story that you remember that is just a seminal moment in your mind?
Well, there were a couple of things that were very early on that happened that always resonated with me. When Arazi won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile of 1991, I was only like 6 or 7 months into this job. And Dick Girardi, who worked for the Philadelphia paper, who I became friends with because of our close proximity in papers and coverage sites. And I said to him, is that normal? Like what that horse did, go from last and circle the whole field and win like that with the jockey sort of like waving his finger up like he's number one. I said, is that normal? He goes, no, that's not right. So that performance, which I would say if you talk to people who have covered Breeders' Cup, well, I guess I'm one of them, as long as it's been around, still top 5, top 7, top 10, that juvenile performance by Arazi has to be, I thought it was an amazing performance. The 1994 Travers with Holy Bull, that horse resonates because I was at that time I was covering kind of Jersey racing and Jimmy Kroll and the connections there. And that horse, I still remember the Travers when Wayne Lucas put out that rabbit to Comanche Trail. And Holy Bull had to put that horse away. And then Tom Durkin's great call. There's cause for concern. And here comes concern. And Holy Bull wins it. And I remember one of the things that I remember was a little while after that race, I went to see Jimmy back. He was in the stakes barn there next to Ciro's. And when I went over there, and Wayne Lucas comes over to shake his hand and congratulate him and just tell him, what a great horse he had. And I was thinking about that Saturday when I'm interviewing, 30 years later, Wayne Lucas is winning the Pennsylvania Derby still at 89 and people are going crazy for him. So it's those things sort of, just connected there. But early on, it just seemed like a lot of those horses, Cigar came around and did what he did. And the early part of my career, those kind of horses still stand out today, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No doubt. I love hearing those stories. It's a great full circle thing to see Wayne 30 years later still winning big races and you still covering those races. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a general question about the health of New York racing. I think that the way I look at the sport now, Kentucky's going to be here forever. California is kind of in a precarious situation right now where it could go either way. New York, I feel like, is somewhere in the middle. Like they're making the big capital improvements at Belmont Park. Saratoga obviously is a booming success every year. but the aqueduct product starts to wither and you're getting fewer and fewer dates as the years go on. In your 20 some odd years of covering New York racing, where are you at in terms of how bullish you are on the future of the sport here?
I'll admit I have some concerns. I'm at Belmont most mornings, and I kind of call my nickname for the clocker stand there. Probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I kind of call it the den of depression. There's a lot of people there that are it's just a lot of negativity, a lot of, what are we going to do? How are we going to make it better? We can't continue to do it this way. Yep. And some points they make are correct. But then again, stand up for yourself and try and affect change and find out, if there's got to be some like minds there, and then take your concerns and complaints and go to management and try and work something out. There are a couple of things that New York that NYRA really can't do much about. The cost of doing business in New York is higher than the cost of doing business in Kentucky for sure, and in a lot of other jurisdictions. For whatever reason, the labor board seems to be fixated on New York horsemen and maybe not go other jurisdictions. And it scares a lot of, we've seen penalties and fines levied on New York horsemen, and that scares these guys. They're not necessarily doing anything egregiously wrong. They've been doing what they've been doing because this is not a 9-to-5 industry. It's not for the trainers. It's not for the staff. Not for almost anybody. And it's trying, when you have to comply to those 9-to-5 and everything and overtime, and those costs continue to go up. And some areas of the country, those aren't in effect. And if they are, the hourly cost to pay a hot walker, groom, extra, whatever, is higher in New York. And it's, the purses are good, but they're not as good as Kentucky. And Kentucky has made it now. You can be insulated in Kentucky. You don't have to ever leave Kentucky if you don't want to. The winter product is synthetic at Turfway Park. That's where we're headed. And the money's still better there than it'll be here. Yeah, we have Saratoga. I get it. Saratoga is, the crown jewel. But you can ship into Saratoga. You don't have to necessarily stay there, be based there.
Right.
Some owners do want you there, and those owners are getting up there in age, and we'll see if that still continues down the road. But you don't really have to leave Kentucky. And recruiting horsemen to New York, I think, is the toughest task. And I think we'll see if they can do that in a couple of years when they go to winter racing as a synthetic product. Woodbine Woodbine horsemen ship down there? I think to start they would. Are they going to stay? Mark Cassey might. He's got a good bankroll. He's got well-heeled owners. Does Kevin Attard stay? I don't know. Does anybody else up there stick around? I don't know.
Right.
And I also think you have a lot of big barns here. Not that they don't have them in other states too, but there's 5 top trainers here have a lot of horses, and they're tough to compete against. And even sometimes it's more perception than reality. Like when you have 2-year-olds, Chad Brown doesn't start 2-year-olds until Saratoga. We should have a booming 2-year-old program in the spring. You don't have to run against his 2-year-olds. We don't. So I don't know the answer to that. But I do so. They run a lot of 2-year-old races in Kentucky in the spring. And those horses this summer came to Saratoga and kicked butt.
Dave, ironically enough, Den of Despair and Depression was actually the original name of our previous podcast with Bill Finn. So it's interesting that you brought that up. So the industry is at a precipice right now. We all know that it can go one way or the other. Yet these yearling sales are through the roof. There seems to be, hope springs eternal at a lot of these 2-year-old sales as well. How do you attribute the disconnect between the reality of what's going on in racing with the euphoria that goes on at the sales?
It's a good question. And I guess there's a lot of people getting involved in particular horses. And, what was one used to be one owner used to have 40 horses. Now 40 people have one horse, and it just seems like you get all these groups together and they buy, they spend a lot of money on a particular yearling and they race it for, I don't know, if they're lucky, 6 to 8 to 9 times. And if they hit that grade 1, the horse is off to stud. And I don't know that that's great for the industry, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's hard when you see these numbers that they're rolling out there and how well the yearling sales are. Now, Be interesting to see where these horses wind up, because it seems like there's a lot more foreign interest in our yearlings, and they take them out of here, not just to different states, but to different countries. And we'll see how many of those are actually going to go abroad, and how many. Now, we've had some owners and trainers go to Tattersalls and bring some horses back, but I'm going to say I think there might be more the other way. I think we might be taking more horses out of here going abroad than coming from there to here. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how long. The other interesting thing I thought about is, a lot of these, I see where there's a big push now where these retired athletes are getting involved in horse racing and spending a lot of money. And for a guy like Jason Worth, who, prefers, pardon the pun, hit the home run with Dornoch.
Right.
What happens when those home runs are foul balls or singles? And what happens when, he's no longer, he's no longer drawing a paycheck from an organization, a major league organization. Right. And so at some point somebody says, hey, we need to rein this in a little bit. So that's good for right now. I don't know how many legs it has.
You're a journalist unlike us, so you can't have the same strength of opinion that we have, but I really I love talking to you because I you do clearly have such a knowledge and passion for the game. This is the last question. I prefaced it by that because maybe you can't opine on this completely, but since HISA came in, we've had a lot of a great uptick in terms of safety numbers. I think that we've seen a cleaner sport, at least anecdotally. You don't see these big run off the screen types off the claim. You don't see these 30% trainers nearly as much as we used to. Do you think that there has been significant progress made since this whole deal came into being?
I think there's been some progress, significant. I'm going to hold back on that a little bit. It irks me when we start seeing trainers get these positives and being sort of put out there as trainers who are cheating, and then all of a sudden, a little while later, oh no, we're going to lift that suspension. It's not what we thought it was, or it's not as egregious, or it's contamination or whatever. There have been trainers who, regardless of that, have had their reputations tarnished, lost clients, and I think there will be more that happens too. I don't like the shoot first, ask questions mentality that they've kind of come out of the box with, and which to me is quite surprising for a government agency. I thought, I didn't think it would be that way. I don't know how much. I know there's the protocols that have been put in place, whether it's by HISA or HISA regular, or the racing commissions or the racetracks. But yeah, there's been, we had a great Saratoga from a safety perspective. Unlike last year, we had a terrible Saratoga. Was that anything in particular that HISA did? I can't quantify that. I'm sure there was a role in it. I also believe that there was smarter decisions made in terms of usage of the turf course at Saratoga, specifically this year as opposed to last year. So I think that had something to do with it. So I think there's all combination. I don't think you could ever just put it in on one particular entity or one suggestion that has been made. I do think it's a cleaner sport if you take into account the fact that these positives that are being called for therapeutic medications, or just the fact that you give an injection 6 days out from a workout as opposed to 7, aren't, don't lump them in with the major violations that have been made, because they're not. And the problem with the presentation from them is that it's almost made out to be that way. You go on a website, HISA, Highway, whatever, and you see different colors. But if you're just looking at it from a fan's perspective, or you don't really know that. You just see a bunch of names and colors. You don't necessarily know that this is not as egregious as that. And I just think it could have been done a little bit better. Bringing in horsemen is a good idea. That should have been done from the start. Questions such as what are we missing? What should we be looking at? And what are we missing? Should have been asked earlier than say what they have to.
No, it's fair. It's definitely fair. Dave, thank you so much for the time and for the knowledge and for the excellent reporting over the years. Because I mean it, like, you have been a real shining light in an industry that I think does not have a ton of great journalistic voices. You're that guy. So appreciate the time. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you for that. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Appreciate it.
Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. TaylorMade, finally, the Marathon September sale wrapped up, so you guys can kick your feet up for like 5 seconds, I'm sure, because there's plenty of more yearlings to sell with the October sale coming up right around the corner, and then of course the marquee November sale soon after that. Appreciate everything the Taylor family and the Taylor team does to get all of these horses to market for their clients, and they just do an unbelievable job. You don't have to take it from my perspective. You can just look at the sales results. Go to the Keeneland September site, sort by consignor, and you can see TaylorMade, high priced, mid-price, low price. It doesn't matter. They obviously are very successful with the top dollar offerings, but they treat every single horse as if they're going to be that 7-figure topper because they're all important to that client. And TaylorMade knows that, and that's why they've built the brand that they have over several decades in this business. And as always, TaylorMade Stallions is worth checking out as well. People making decisions for the 2025 breeding season. I did a lot of stallions at a lot of good price points that you can book. I mentioned Tacitus last week. We got 2 of him at the sales this year at West Point. I know Jon and DJ Stable got one as well. He's the one I would definitely point to, but obviously not this time leading the way. You've got Still Regard, Instagram, Knicks Go. The roster is stacked, and they're not all at that Mondo premium price point.
Joe, I can tell you, if I can just interrupt for a quick second. I mean, for as many Instagrams as there were that were written, not Instagrams and Tacitus that were really good looking, there were a number of Knicks Goes where I was like, wow, I was really shocked and amazed at just how developed and how early maturing they look, because that was not necessarily the calling card for Knicks Go himself, but they look like they're going to be ready to go, April, May of their 2-year-old season. So I was really impressed with the Knicks Goes as well. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. It's all the rage, the TaylorMade Stallion roster, and with good reason. All right, so we are going to discuss a few races that happened on Saturday at the racetrack that shall not be named, because there were some important results in terms of championship implications and potential next steps in the Breeders' Cup. Speaking of next stepped into the Greenwood Cup on Saturday. I
see what you did there.
Yeah, professional, baby. Yeah.
I want to see how you do that with Thorpedo Anna.
I did it last week with the Fasig spot. Thorpedo Anna, she is now, right?
It's true.
Yes.
It's true. You are a wordsmith. You are a wordsmith, my friend.
I'm true to this, not new to this. Anyway, next won the Greenwood Cup by a mere 10 lengths on Saturday after winning it by 25 lengths last year. He was 1-20. Was probably the safest bridge jumper bet in history. Is a lot of times those are a little dicey, but there was absolutely no way, unless the jockey fell off the horse, he was going to run worse than third in that race. And now the question becomes, does he run in the Breeders' Cup? I'm going to quote here from Doug Cowens after the race. He said, there are a lot of things that can go wrong in that kind of race, talking about the Breeders' Cup. I'm not saying we're against it, but we'll sit down and have a big conversation. The thing about the horse is we'll always want to have fun with them. The money doesn't matter. We found something the horse likes to do, and we want to keep doing it with him. It's not solely my decision, but my gut tells me to stay with the distance and give up the surface if I would do something like that. I know you got to face the Europeans, and they have a good turn of foot. You worry about that. Going to the dirt 1.25 miles, I worry about the pace. We don't know where we'll go, but we'll see. I mean, to me, that's shocking. I would run him in the Classic. Like, this is if there were ever an older male division ripe for the picking, this is the one. Like, honestly, I would take Thorpedo Anna over most of the older dirt males in this country. Like, I would be shocked if they sent him to the turf, because I understand that he's had past success on the grass, but that was way back. That was like when he was first claimed. He's been a dirt marathoner since then, and he's not like he's this runoff speed. Like, he can sit behind horses, he can track, like he can do everything you need to do to be successful at 1.25 miles. He clearly is fast enough. I don't understand the reticence to go after the crown jewel in this Breeders' Cup and any Breeders' Cup. I think that would be a big mistake if they ran him in the turf over the Classic. But either way, I just want to see him challenge, because these races put me to sleep, Jon. And I get it. It's fun for the owner and fun for the trainer. It's not that often in this business that you can have like a free stakes win, and he's had one after another. But at a certain point, you got to think, you have a horse this good. Don't you want to get to the bottom of him? Don't you want to see how good he really, really is? And I think that spot would be the Classic. But as long as he is not running against the riding with Bidens of the world next time out, Jon, I'm a happy boy.
And Joe, okay, the horse we're talking about next year. The horse has won 7 consecutive races, all on dirt. All but, all of them were 101 buyer or more. He earned 102 over the weekend at that racetrack. Yet, and all of them were stakes. Now, if I said to you, Joe Bianca, don't cheat, don't look, how much money has the horse earned this year for winning the Murphy Marathon, the Brooklyn, the stake race at Saratoga, and now the Greenwood Cup? How much do you think he's earned?
I'm going to say 400,000, 350,
okay, you would
400.
be correct. You'd be correct, Joe Bianca. You would be absolutely correct. You're a good man. $400,000. So you have arguably the most dominant marathoner in recent history, and the horse has made $400,000 for winning 4 races this year. You got to step him up, if for no other reason, because he's a gelding, 6-year-old gelding, and he doesn't have any stallion deals down the road. All the reasons you mentioned about how there's a dearth of talent at that upper level for older males. We will go through the 3-year-old group. There is some talent there, but for all intents and purposes, you would have to think that if I wanted to run for the most amount of money, which is obviously the Breeders' Cup Classic, against arguably an easier field than the turf race with the Euros coming in and with some good domestic horses here as well, that if you ran him in the Breeders' Cup Classic, I mean, would he be 5-1? Would he be 6? I mean, he wouldn't be like 20-1 in the race. He wouldn't even be 10-1 in the race. So if you're doing it strictly with, hey, I got a horse that can be 5-6-1 in the richest race remaining on the calendar in the American racing, and this is my chance to really test him. And I mean, they've managed him beautifully, but this is a chance to really test him. I got 6 weeks between races. You got to run in the Classic, especially because his buyer numbers and his sheet numbers are so much better on the dirt.
It's so funny how long this has been going on, and I'm glad. I don't think they have this race anymore. I mean, if they do, it's like ungraded. I was at Keeneland in 2022 when he won that Breeders' Cup Dirt Marathon race. I remember him blowing past me on the turn. That was almost 2 years ago now that he's been kicking around the friggin' Washington Generals and the Little Giants of the world in the marathon division, because there is no division. It's him. He's the division. And it's long past time, I think, that we see how good he really is. And I'm hoping that we'll get that chance. I mean, just John, am I crazy, or is the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Classic going to be a horse who's never been on dirt before? Who's never run on dirt before? Right. City of Troy, I think, if you held the race today, would be favored in the Classic. He's never stepped foot on a dirt track. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about how big of an opportunity this is to win the richest race in America, and I don't know what is. John, take it away. Seize the gray. I know you got to be in your bonnet.
It's not so much a bee in my bonnet as it is, people need to tamper down excitement and enthusiasm a little bit. The horse won a grade 1, which is phenomenal. All of us want to do that. All of us want to win a grade 1. He was, he took the race. It was ripe for the picking. He went right to the front and kept going. And that's the way, you win a race like that, is you take it to the rest of the group. Ran a 97 buyer, was the second best number of his life outside of the Preakness win, a few months ago. That being said, can we please relax with this horse is going to be 3-year-old of the year based on his current resume? Can we just tamper it down a little bit, just a little enthusiasm? Joe, he won 2 grade 1s this year. Absolutely important. One of them was a Triple Crown race, the Preakness. He did it on a sloppy track, went wire to wire. Then he got trounced in the Belmont. Then he got trounced in the Jim Dandy. They brought him back in the Pennsylvania Derby, which he went gate to wire and won. And it was an impressive 5 seconds off the track record. So again, brilliant management. And look, I want to say one thing. Like I've crapped on my racehorse because I don't necessarily think that it's a good business model for investors. But I will say one thing. They did a phenomenal job getting a stallion contract with these kickers in it from Gainesway, because now they've been able to maneuver the horse and manage the horse properly, where, they're getting millions of dollars. Somebody's getting millions of dollars. They're getting millions of dollars from Gainesway for ticking off another grade 1 race. So, from management of myracehorse.com, they did a brilliant job. But is he as good at this point in time as Fierceness, as Sierra Leone, Dornoch, Thorpedo Anna, for example, in being what some people say the obvious leader in the 3-year-old group right now? I would say nay. I would say that's bullshit as far as I'm concerned, because yes, the horse did win 2 grade ones, and everyone's got warts in this division, Joe. Fierceness had bad losses in the Derby and the Holy Bull, but he won the Travers, he won the Jim Dandy, he won the Florida Derby, all, legitimate races, even though Jim Dandy's a grade 2. 3 quality races. I know you don't like Sierra Leone because he always comes from out of it, but he did win the Bluegrass. He placed in the Travers and the Dandy and the Belmont and the Kentucky Derby. Mystic Dam won the Kentucky Derby, but nobody's heard from him since. Okay, so we don't know about that. Dornoch, you can make a case for as being the leader, winning the Haskell, which I thought was a tougher field than the Pennsylvania Derby, the Belmont, and the Fountain of Youth. And yeah, he wasn't anywhere in the Travers and the Kentucky Derby, but he's a horse that's built for the Classic again. And then, Joe, I would even sneak in an argument for domestic product better than Gray.
Let's settle down now.
Because he won the Jerkins, which is a grade 1, and a couple in the Dwyer and the Tampa Bay Derby, and he is going to be one of the favorites in the mile. So if he wins the mile, the Breeders' Cup Mile, wait, let me finish. If he wins the Breeders' Cup Mile, then is he does have a more legitimate resume than some of the other ones that I mentioned before? If they don't run any good in the Classic, if next goes gate to wire or wins the Classic at that point, that's not even to mention the fact that the best 3-year-old in the country is Thorpedo Anna. Please have the microphone.
All right, the floor is mine. Yeah, I don't share your disdain for Seize the Gray. I think he's a cool horse. He's by Arrogate. Like I do like that, My Racehorse had a bunch of people there really excited to be part of it. Like, obviously we went back and forth about whether it's like a real investment or whether it's a fan club. Regardless, like, it's bringing a lot of people into the sport, and I don't think we can poo-poo that at any more than we would any other, fan club or racing club that is in the sport. It was cool to see Dwayne Lucas win another grade 1 at 89 years old. But yes, if anybody's out there seriously making the argument that Seize the Gray should be the 3-year-old champion, they got some bats in the belfry, my friend, because the 2 times he won the Preakness against, let's be real, Aghast, Mystic Dan, and a bunch of other nobodies. He won the Pat Day Mile against Nash, who's one of the bigger phony 3-year-olds in the country. And then the 2 times before Saturday that he really faced the best of his crop, he lost by 12 3/4 lengths in the Belmont, and he lost by 12 lengths in the Jim Dandy. Got dusted by Fierceness, dusted by Dornoch. Good for them. They found $1 million grade 1 that none of the other big boys showed up to. We said it last week. This isn't revisionist history. We said it last week. There was nobody really scary in that race when Dragoon Guard was going to be the favorite. Good for them. They found that spot, but no, he's not the 3-year-old champion. And it's another stallion going to stud that, like,
right.
I mean, you drill down on his resume, like, is it really like worth propagating the genes for a horse like this? Like, he's a nice horse and he's been a cool story, but it's just inflated resume. I would agree with you.
No, absolutely, Joe. It's so much so that, like, he earned a 98 buyer winning the Pennsylvania Derby. I'm looking up 97 buyer winning the Pennsylvania Derby. Batten Down, who won the Bourbon Flight, earned a 98.
Yeah.
And nobody, I was in the Batten Flight, in the Bourbon Flight. Nobody's going to confuse, the horses in that race for the horses in the Triple Crown races by any stretch.
I was definitely a Bourbon Flight deep by the time the
I would hope so.
Pennsylvania Derby came around on Saturday, and
I would hope so.
And I didn't, obviously, as you know, wouldn't bet a single dollar on that fucking card.
By the way, just so we're shifting back into the hills of Park. How about they had almost an hour between races, setting things up. So the last race on the card was actually at night. It was like Meadowlands-esque. I thought they were going to have everyone turn their lights on in the infield to, on the parking lot to light the way for the last race. I mean, that was, again, another one where it was like, Why? Why?
Yes. I should ask David Grening about that because he had a good tweet. He was like, if all the My Racehorse owners can come back and turn their cell phone lights on, then maybe there'll be enough light to run
That was a great, that was a classic line.
But of course, they plowed along and did it anyway. I just want to touch on Thorpedo Anna before we wrap.
Oh, that's right. The most important 3-year-old in the country.
Yes, she also ran Saturday. And, she wasn't all that impressive, but it was just one of those races where even though she only won by a head, it just seemed like she had them whenever she wanted. She got I think a 97 buyer in that race. She beat Gunsong, who was a pretty nice filly for Mark Hennig, but obviously not in Thorpedo Anna's class normally. And she's just, to me, I would love to see her in the Breeders' Cup class. She actually got 93 buyer, my bad. So it definitely was not her top effort. She regressed a bunch, and I'm thinking maybe that tells Kenny McPeak he should run in the distaff, but I don't know. I just don't think that race was a true measure of her talent level. And again, I'd love to see her in the Classic, love to see Next in the Classic. That would really bring some juice to the race, along with City of Troy, because outside of City of Troy right now, that is a boring Classic field on paper. So we'll see. She didn't do everything that she did in the Travers in some of her previous races, but she won. She put herself in a great spot, broke immaculately as she almost always does, and she's just a running machine, John, that we would all love to have in the barn.
No question about it. And she got boxed in pretty well, the first half of the race, and it was like, no big deal. Once she saw the opening, she bolted through, and Brian Hernandez did the right thing by just kind of wrapping up on her. She could have won by a number of lengths. By daylight, if you want. She didn't have to. We called it that she was going to bounce 20 points. It was almost exactly 20 points. For those of you at home, she ran a 111 buyer, and in the Travers, she ran a 93. So 18 points. I think that's pretty damn close for prognosticators like ourselves. But this wasn't the important race, on her resume. This really wasn't, even though it sounds silly because it was the cotillion, for God's sake. It was, another grade one on her resume. But it's the next race that is going to be the most important for her. And again, not that I need to give Kenny McPeak any advice whatsoever. And I know he's a friend of the show and he listens, but I would run her in the distaff and just kick ass and just coast to multiple championships at that point. Because, again, if it's in her case, the multiple championships is going to be worth, a lot of money. Is it worth as much as the Classic? No, but there's a bigger risk running in the Classic, even with this kind of tampered down, watered down field that may be assembled in there. She is going to be the queen bee in the distaff, and all eyes will be on her. And I think, she can come back, and she's shown that she dominates that field.
I would love to see her against Idiomatic. So yeah, I'm not going to be disappointed either way. I just think, she ran so well in the Travers. I would love to see her take another crack against Boys to see if she can get that W. Just real quickly, what we have to look forward to this weekend. We got a couple of big Breeders' Cup preview days at Belmont and Aqueduct, the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic on Saturday. Warlike Goddess going for 3 in a row. This is where we need a stat department. Julia, has there ever been a filly or mare to win a grade 1 against males 3 years in a row? Get right on that, would you please? So I'd love to see her accomplish that feat. I feel like Julia's going to pop in and say something.
I was waiting.
I'm waiting for it.
That'll work for you.
But we also got the Pilgrim, the Vosburg, the Woodward on Saturday. Let's take a gander at the Woodward Stakes and see what monsters Next is avoiding. Well, it's the fourth race of the day, so that's usually a great sign when you have a grade 2 on the fourth race. It's 5 horses, so par for the course. Skippy Longstocking, Croupi, Tappet Trice, Mask Parade, and a Chilean horse I've never heard of. So yeah, that might be what's waiting for next, other than like the big dog in City of Troy at the Classic. So I'd love to see him again running that race. Also, this is the big California Cup day at Santa Anita. We got the California Crown, grade 1 $1 million race. And we got the Eddie D Stakes, the John Henry Turf Championship, the City of Hope Mile. I'm interested to see what the California Crown looks like, what it handles, because this is a new thing. Like it used to be the Awesome Again Stakes, and now Belinda Stronach and the Stronach Group, instead of boosting the purse accounts, which, again, are in the red at Santa Anita, it seems, meet after meet, they want this big day hopefully people come and see her show. But that's what's on tap for this weekend.
Well, and Joe, don't forget, if I can throw in my last DJ Stable interest, Shifty is going to run in the Miss Grillo, the Win and You're In on Sunday. Entries are Wednesday, so before we're precursoring the entries, but make sure that's must see TV, except for you and me, because I understand you're going to be out of the country and they're extraditing me out of the country pretty soon. So neither one of us are going to be around to watch Shifty run on Sunday. But Joe, where are you going to be? Where in the world is Joe Bianca going to be next week?
I'm going to be flying to Santorini, Greece for my honeymoon, which is very exciting. Now the travel is going to be a nightmare. This is where I get on my Karen soapbox. We had an American Airlines flight to Athens, which is already like a 10-hour flight, and then another trip to Santorini, which was 15 hours. They canceled our flight and added a layover to Chicago. So we have to fly like 3 hours in the wrong direction and then have a 5-hour layover in Chicago to then jump on a 10-hour flight to Athens. Like, I'm so mad, and they haven't done anything for us. Meg went full Karen on them, and they were like, sorry, got your money, shit out of luck. So the trip is going to be amazing. I cannot wait. I'll show you plenty of photos and videos. But yeah, screw you, American Airlines.
And how long are you going to be in Greece once you do?
I'll be there like 8 or 9 days, so a little over a week.
Wow. Very, very cool. Very, very
Meg's yelling from downstairs. Don't forget about the seats. Yeah, they split up our seats too. Like,
well, that's probably good for Meg. We'll
all right.
Tell her not to complain too much on that. She could be like, I can't believe they did that.
John just wiped his brow for our audience.
For the audience,
anyway,
they can't see. They can't.
We're babbling. Let's wrap up the show.
Exactly. I'm going to be thank you for asking, Joe. I'm going to be in Provence, France, and then maybe go over for the yearling sales as well. But I do appreciate your interest in my travel as well.
I mean, you're always somewhere. Like, come on, this is a bigger deal for me than it is for you.
It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. I'm excited for you. But the reason why I'm getting into this is because, needless to say, we are not going to have a show next week. Is why I'm getting into this. For those of you diehards, you're going to have to watch some clips on replay. Patty Wolf is going to come in and explain to me why that's wrong. Obviously, yes, Patricia. Oh, and as Patty's saying that nobody can hear her, so I'm going to have to plug the breakaways, as well as maybe an off the rails. Julia, once you're done looking up Joe's trivia questions, could we maybe produce an off the rails? Because God knows we've had a lot of mistakes and funny moments that we will need to replay. And Joe, I think what you should do is, you need to have Megan call back American Airlines and say, God damn it, don't you know who I am? I represent 50,000 subscribers, most of them international. And they are going to do a shitstorm on your parade if you don't fix this.
Show your loyalty to Rail Talk and spam American Airlines comments. That's how I'll know you really love me, if you can get us upgraded on this flight.
That's right. Skip, do it twice, please. Will you please?
Skip's done enough.
Skip has done enough for this show. That is really true.
He's like a horse that's won a grade 3. It's like, oh, he's done enough. Time to send him off to stud.
Send him off to stud. Yee! And now we've lost a subscriber in Kelly.
All right, so that's going to do it for episode 62 of Rail Talk. As John mentioned, why'd you shake your head, John?
I can't believe we're at 62.
Shake your head into a nod. That's a new one.
It's like the Roger Maris of podcasting.
That's right. Yeah, with no asterisk either.
No asterisk. No, believe me, there is
no steroids.
No steroids, no performance-enhancing drugs whatsoever. People would say, as a matter of fact, we're taking performance-dampening drugs, as a matter of fact, the way that I talk, at least. And
we're still powering through. 62 was a really good one. Thank you to Dave Grening for stopping by. Thank you to our producer, Patty Wolf, our associate producers, Julia Agresta and Nathan Wilkinson. Shout out to the sponsors. Thank you for tuning in. And don't forget, as John mentioned earlier, no full show next week, because John and I will both be gallivanting around Europe, but there will be a new breakaway Rail Talk featuring Jon Green, so make sure to check that out. And then we'll see you back here in 2 weeks on Rail Talk.